Hello, everybody, and welcome to this edition of our Values Jam guest session series. And Brad, thank you so much for joining. Would you please like to introduce yourself and tell us a bit about the great work that you do?
Sure. Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate being here. So when I introduce myself, I think, most importantly, I'm a husband, I'm a dad. We've got a great 13-year-old son. I like to think of myself as a great member of my family, great friend. I also am deeply, deeply involved with youth nonprofits. I love mentoring young people. I teach entrepreneurship to 18 to 25-year-olds in Camden, New Jersey. Everyone in my class starts their own businesses, that's part of the class. It's very hands-on, so it's led to many, many adventures in entrepreneurship. I also wrote a book, which is how we met. It's
Yeah.
called HumanKind, Changing the World One Small Act at a Time. And it's about those moments when a small act of kindness that seems inconsequential has this ripple effect, changing lives, in many cases, thousands of lives. And it's been tons of fun. Like I love writing the book and then meeting the people who read it and getting to talk about it.
Yeah, isn't it just a brilliant area for meeting really interesting, lovely people? It's just a fantastic topic.
Yes, and when you start talking about it, you realize how many people's lives have been changed by a small act of kindness because they start sharing their own stories, and it's just like enlivening. It makes me excited.
Yeah, yeah. Well, while you're excited, we're going to dive into the values jam. And I've got the deck here. And what I'm going to do is ask you to assist me to choose a card at random. So first off, how many times would you like me to cut the deck?
Let's cut it once. You'll do a great job the first time.
Okay. And would you like the left pile or the right pile?
The right pile, please.
The right pile. So now give me a number between 1 and 25.
13.
Ooh.
It's our son's age. That's why it popped to mind.
How's about that then?
Teamwork. I love teamwork.
Good. So, first question. What does teamwork mean? And what does it look, feel, and sound like for you?
I mean, teamwork is when there's a common goal and everyone is trying to achieve that goal and kind of getting there and working together is the most important focus. And you see it most easily in conversation when people are saying we instead of I, and when people are putting kind of the greater good and everyone as the first priority. It's a beautiful thing when it happens, and you can get so much accomplished when you're working together as a team.
Yeah, and I think you've used the words obviously we and together. And I think for me, teamwork is almost giving up of yourself, like you said, for the greater good. It's kind of making me secondary and we primary because you're just performing a role for the team rather than being anything too important on your own as an individual. And it does feel great. I've been really lucky professionally and a bit in sport to be part of teams that have experienced great achievements, and much, much better to experience that as part of a team rather than some individual accolade, which kind of, I don't know, there's something about being able to share it with other people and be part of it with others rather than just on your lonesome.
I agree. It's way better with a group, and you can do so much more.
Yeah. What about the metaphor then? So what is it? What does teamwork look like, feel like, sound like?
So I mean, I maybe it's easiest for me to just kind of use an example, a couple examples that come to
Yeah.
mind. I'd say one, I spent a lot of time at a place called Hopeworks, and it's a nonprofit where we, serve 18 to 24-year-olds who want to make a change in their lives. They've generally been through a lot of trauma. Some of them are homeless, and they come in and we give them job training and we employ them in our businesses, and, amazing things happen. And when you are trying to think about what we should do, like the culture our CEO has set is where people are thinking, all right, what's best for this young person? It's not about me getting credit because I came up with this great idea. There's no employees who are like, I did this and look how great it did. They're all like, all right, what can we do for Amy? What does she need? How do we pull this together? And like the mission is very clear. And also, when we're talking about what we need to do, it's not the CEO saying, here's our plan and we're going to go forward. It's a group conversation. Like, what should we do? What do we think is the right path for us? Where should we go? And it's beautiful because everyone coming in can see, okay, this is the culture. Do I fit in? And that helps us kind of filter and get the right people. And when you're there, we're really clear on what we're focused on. And it's like, how do we be there for our young people and provide them with the opportunities they deserve? So to me, that is teamwork. It's from the very top saying, I'm not making the decisions. We're going to together figure out where we're going to go.
Mm.
And then together we're going to get there for a greater good, which is, helping our community in this case.
Yeah, and I remember when I was in corporate roles, I used to say to my guys that we just all of us played a role. Some were more senior than others, some were paid differently than others. But fundamentally, unless everybody played their role, the team didn't work. So in that sense, it's kind of de-hierarchying the organization down to I'm just doing my job kind of thing, the same as you. And for me, listening to what you described there in that example, it helped me to identify the metaphor words. And what do you think of these? So I think teamwork sounds like a buzz. So I don't know if you've been into, let's say, two different organizations that you visit, and one you go into like an office environment and it's chatter, and you can just sense it. And then you go into another one and it's deathly silent. And you can tell which one is going to be performing better, right? So that's the sound like for me. And then the look like, I've just got this picture of arms around each other, that close and connected. So those are the two pictures that have come, or sorry, one sound, one picture that's come for me.
I agree 100%. I used to work for a company where part of my job was looking at other companies to acquire.
Okay.
And I wound up visiting a lot of companies. You could tell the second you were in the company, and the buzz is the perfect sound. It is like there's this buzz, this harmony, and you're like, all right, this place, they're on the same page, they're working together, they like each other. And other companies where you'd walk in and be like, oh my goodness, like who knows what we have to deal with on the culture side if we acquire this company.
And that particular example kind of really amuses me because, there are a lot of businesses and consultancy firms that charge a lot of money to do an in-depth analysis of how productive and positive your culture is. But you can just go and stand there. You can work it out for yourself, right?
Well, it's like so much in life. Like people do tons of research. They're doing all this research when really the best they should do research, but the best research they can do is just visit someplace, talk to someone, ask a question, like see for yourself is going to tell you so much more than everything you could read.
Yeah. And that's something, and I should explain, when we play ValuesJam, this happens a lot actually. And people say, oh my goodness, this conversation has just brought into my mind something that I haven't thought about for sometimes decades. And a psychologist in New Zealand told me that it might be because values conversations are quite deep. And so it might be that previously lapsed neural pathways are being re-sparked or reconnected in some way. And that means that a memory that was kind of hidden or maybe nearly lost is uncovered and comes back again. So the one that you've done for me there is, it's around about 15 years ago. And my original background was commercial hospitality management. So I used to run hotels and conference centers and that sort of thing. I was working in an investment bank, and my job was to oversee the service delivery in all of the office locations around the world. So I was making a case to our operational management that they should not fill their diary with meetings and just go and walk around and talk to people working in the office and also those delivering the services. And you can imagine I remember this meeting so well. So it was these people looking at me as though I had come from another planet, saying, why would I waste an hour of my time just wandering around? So, and that they wouldn't get it. So in the end, the deal that I did was, can we just try it for 1 hour between now and our next board meeting, and then I'll let you decide whether you want to do it or not. Because it's exactly like you say, when you're out there talking to people and feeling and hearing the reality rather than looking at spreadsheets and reports, that's when you get the truth.
Yes, I mean, so that's some of the best advice I received when I was a manager. So, I had started a company when I was young, and at one point, one of my colleagues, Shari, came to me and said, I see that you work really hard. You need to walk around the office. I was like, walk around the office? She goes, yes, you need to just talk to people who are out there working. You need to walk around. And I did it. And it was the best time I spent, to your point. And thank heavens she was willing to come to me and say, this is what you need to do, so I could try it. But my initial reaction was like, I have so much work to do. Like, how am I going to make the time? But it was time, as you said, it's time well spent, because part of being a team is knowing each other, right? It's not just someone, like when I think of teams, like I worked at an ad agency, it's not, oh, that's someone in project management. That's someone in project management. They got 2 kids. They love baseball. These are their hobbies. Like when you know people, you work so much better with them. And it reminds you, these are people. Do I really want to send that email? Do I, how am I going to approach it? Because it's not just someone in another department. It's this person, which I think makes us all more polite and better team players.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's so easy to fall into that trap of performing your functional role and communicating with another person who's performing their functional role without touching the human side of it. And that's leaving so much out. I think COVID has, in my experience, I'd be interested in your view on this. COVID seems to have encouraged people to be more themselves than they might have been tempted to be before. I've had people, this was during the first lockdowns, where people said, even though we're apart, because of Zoom calls, and I can see this guy's where they live and they're in their normal clothes and the guy didn't have a shave, rather than, oh, I've put on my corporate uniform and act. So they felt that they knew each other better, even though they were apart. What's your experience been of that change over the last couple of years?
I've seen half and half.
Okay.
So, probably 50% of the people have exactly that feeling. What I've heard from other people is that because their meetings are all Zoom meetings, they're more like do the business, then get back to work. And they're missing that kind of, you're going to the water cooler, or you're going up to get coffee and you're talking to your colleagues. And those interactions that are unplanned don't happen anymore. So I've heard it both ways.
Yeah, and that latter, you've given me the temptation now to do a bit of a sales plug for ValuesJam, but I was talking to somebody about this the other day around how, because we're less together in one place, it means that, like you say, the water cooler conversations, or the walking down the corridor, or maybe going to a bar after work and stuff like that, is happening less. And so apart from the dilution of the culture generally for the organization, it also makes the development of the relationships between individuals more challenging to take forward. And so we're talking to a number of companies about how ValuesJam can actually fill that hole. So imagine in an organization, let's say it's global, imagine that we are both employees and our employer says, guys, we'd like you to have a ValuesJam every week with somebody in the world. And so, Brad chooses to have a conversation with somebody in finance, their own function in Baltimore today. Next week, Brad chooses to have a ValuesJam with somebody in London in marketing, and then somebody in Moscow in research or whatever it is. So over a period of a year, imagine the number of bonding conversations that could, to a certain extent, I think, replace what's being lost by people not being together.
I love that. I mean, I think, and a lot of companies are still remote. So at least here, a lot of the companies are still remote. And I feel like it's important to plan those interactions. And sometimes people cringe like, wait, you're planning these casual interactions? Yes, because now we're in our houses and we don't see each other. And I think what you're suggesting is a great way to do it. And companies, like, it's in their best interest to think about this. I know, like at Hopeworks, who I mentioned before, we had, some of the team members came up with these kind of get-togethers. So we actually did happy hours where we'd get on Zoom
Yeah.
and we'd do two truths and a lie or
Yeah.
other types of games, and we break into small groups, just get to know each other, because especially people who were added to the team during the pandemic, like some of them hadn't met any of us in person. There was one person who worked for us who, when we met him, we realized he was just so tall, but no one knew because he was always sitting in front of his computer. So I think having ValuesJam conversations, having some other ways that you're creating these interactions is really important to a team that works together and knows each other outside of just the person who does certain work.
Yeah, I've been thinking about this quite a lot recently. So this is not very well developed, but let me pass it by you, because what you've just described about how the organization or the leaders need to design basically the framework for these interactions to happen, and then people questioning that. Well, it seems to me that before, leaders / organizations were benefiting from the natural goodwill and sociability of their employees, because if you put a bunch of people together, they will find a way to socialize, right? And the leaders didn't have to bother thinking about stuff, they'll do it. They just find their own way. The organization didn't have to fund it. The guys will go out bowling or down to the bar or go out for a coffee. They'll do that themselves. Whereas now, there is not that happening naturally. And so I believe that it's the organizations and the leaders' responsibility to take responsibility for that happening, to design it, to fund it if necessary, and to make it happen, rather than just say, oh, our people are not interacting anymore. But there's not a responsibility, but a cost that comes with that, both in terms of thinking and also potentially funding, that I can understand organizations are probably not that keen to take on. So, I mean, have you heard anything like that before? And what do you think of the point?
So I think companies should take this on. I think there's multiple ways to do it. So I think leadership needs to be committed to make it happen.
Yeah.
But it might even be better if leadership kind of got a team of employees together, and those employees were said, here's your budget. And you know what? You get 3 hours of people's time a week or whatever that you have. Why don't you kind of tell us what we should do, and let this employee team come up with the ideas, because they're probably going to come up with something better. I always felt like when I was in leadership, if I could get an employee team, their suggestions were way better than what I would have come up with the other managers, and then empower them to kind of roll this out. And it pays off, because what we see, employee surveys have been done for a long time. Gallup has done it for, it seems like forever.
Yeah.
And when they say like what makes people happy at work, it is not like the how much money they're paid. Like that's one factor, but it's not the most important. They want to be appreciated. They want to feel like they're part of a team. There's certain core values, and we have to invest in that. And if our employees aren't at work, we have to find aren't at work together. We have to find a way that we could make it work virtually or online. So I think it's a critical investment, well worth it. And our employees spend so much time at work. Anything we can do to help them feel more connected, help them feel happier, it's great. Like that's how we make the world a better place. And also, everyone does much better at their jobs. When you're happy at your job, you're a better employee, you're better at service, you're a better team player. Like everything kind of comes together.
Yeah, and I love what there's two bits to what you said there. One was giving it to the employees, which I think is a great suggestion, and the other is about a fund or budget that they can use. And it's almost like saying, of, let's say, 100% of teamwork, we recognize that maybe 25% of that is to do with personal social interaction. Taking that into account, we're therefore going to give this amount of money, and we want you to go ahead and invest it in terms of time and money on personal social interaction stuff, and we'll assess the return on our investment. That's reasonable. But I think at the moment there are so many leaders that are kind of almost ignoring that social personal interaction piece as being either in existence. They're kind of almost saying back-to-back Zoom meetings, end of day, go home. That's it. That's all that's needed to run a business. And it's just not right.
Right. And especially as it gets more and more competitive for talent,
Yeah.
uh, you have to, your talent is going to go somewhere else if they
Yeah.
don't feel like they're a part of something. They spend too much time at work. So in addition to, hey, you run a company, you want to make it a great place to work. You want your people to be happy. I mean, who wouldn't want that? You also want to retain your great talent. And both of those, they come together with, people want to be a part of something bigger, not just a job. They want to feel a part of a team. They want to feel part of an organization. They want to like have a shared mission and know how they contribute to that. So I think everyone will have to eventually get there, even if they're not there yet.
Yeah. And you've reminded me of a quote from The Little Prince. So I can't remember it word for word, but it's something like, if you want to build a boat, don't kind of issue instructions about going to get the wood and how to put it together and all the rest of it. Just get the people to yearn for the open seas. It's like they will find the way to build the boat if they want to be out there on the ocean. Yeah. So let's choose another question then. So this is very practical and experiential. So when have you experienced teamwork?
Gosh, I mean, I've experienced it a lot of places, and I'm trying to think of what, one of my favorites was on the Little League field. So I coach our son's sport teams.
Okay.
Every season I ask him, I was like, hey, would you like me to coach this year? Really hoping he'll say yes. And so far that's happened. And, when I coach Little League, which is our baseball league, sometimes it can get really competitive. Certain parents or certain coaches are like just really competitive, which, baffles me because it's like none of our kids are going to be playing in the majors, and they're kids and they just want to have fun. And, we've had seasons where, I had a season where our team lost almost every game. And the parents just pulled together. It wasn't like, Coach, what are you doing? Like, they were like, let's make it fun. And you know what? We have the best snacks. And the kids were like, yeah, we have the best snacks.
Good.
And you know what? We play, everyone gets to play a position they want to play. Like, we love that. And it was just teamwork of every parent saying, you know what? We're going to work together. We're going to bring these snacks. We're going to come up with fun games. We're going to make sure everyone's excited. And then, and the kids also came together supporting each other, and they could see, and I think, they saw all the adults and how we were acting. If someone made a mistake, they weren't like, oh, why do you run to second and get thrown out? And why do you do this? They're like, good try. And we always say, let the coaches do the coaching, so that,
Yeah.
we're not critical of each other. And also, young kids don't need 50 people telling them what to do. So a little confusing. And it was beautiful. Like all those parents coming together, and everyone, like one parent made baseball cards, like every kid got their own little baseball card. And it was just such a fun season. And it was because of the teamwork, not just of the players, but of the parents. And then even the umpires, like we had the same umpires every week, and they got super into it, and they knew all our kids, and they would come and like have pizza with us or something. And it just became this big fun endeavor. And interestingly enough, what wound up happening is we were the last place team. Then there's the big tournament at the end. We made it all the way to the championships. We did lose in the championships, but it was one of those like, I can't believe we're here.
Yeah.
Uh, but again, I just loved how everyone came together. Everyone wanted to kind of make it a great experience for all of us. And I think I'll also mention, especially, we had one kid on our team who was absolutely a superstar. I mean, this kid was probably one of the youngest on the team, and he was playing up. We were like the oldest kids in that season, and he was by far the best of everyone. And he just was patient and like coached the other kids, and never got down. And I mean, that set great example for everyone else. But everything about that season was magical, and everyone was setting the right tone. It was just a ton of fun.
Sounds like a movie, Brad.
If it was a movie, we probably would have won, but it
Yeah.
did feel, it felt great. I remember we were like, my wife and I were like, I can't believe like we've got the championship game today. And like the team we played against were like super nice. Like their coaches were nice. And most of the people are in this, they're like incredibly nice. They're like, why else are you going to be doing Little League? And it was just like really fun and exciting. Loved it.
It's a great example. I can't match that one because mine's born out of pretty bad situation actually. So this was when the Twin Towers happened, and I had been playing golf, funnily enough, with the bank manager of the hotel that I was running. And I'm not very good at golf at all, but I had sunk a 60-foot putt while playing the golf manager. And so I was ready to tell everybody about this, came back into the clubhouse and looked at the TV and thought I was watching some sort of action movie because it was planes flying into buildings. It was a Marriott flagged property. And that night we lost 50% of our forward bookings. And so from a commercial point of view, we knew that it was going to be tough times. And I got everybody together that the next day and, explained that we'd never experienced anything like this before, that it was going to be tough, that we expected everybody to pull their weight and join in. And I just gave them one promise, and that was that giving anybody redundancy or losing their job would be the very last option for us. We would try everything before we did that. And that's exactly what happened. We had people who were normally working in the reservations office who took days off during the week and then came in at the weekend and served at weddings and stuff like that. We had everybody cleaning their own offices because we, wanted to keep costs down. We just had everybody just did whatever was needed because they were committed to nobody losing their job. And it was just, I'm getting a bit emotional actually. It was a brilliant time born out of adversity.
I think adversity really can bring out the absolute best in people. And when you're honest, like, I don't know what's going to happen, but like, this is our last resort. Like, we're all in it together. I feel like I've seen that not to the extent of what you're mentioning, but at one point I was the chair of a nonprofit called Big Brothers Big Sisters, and it was just a really difficult time, and the government was cutting all their funding to nonprofits, and we had to have layoffs, and we didn't know like who we're going to lay off. And the CEO said, Marlene Olshan, she was amazing. She said, I need to go tell the staff we're going to have layoffs. And I remember telling her, do you want to tell them before we know who's getting laid off? Like everyone's going to look for a job. People are going to be fearful. And she said, it's going to take us weeks to figure that out. People need to know. I need to be honest with them. And I said, all right, let's do that. And the team just came together. They had so many ideas about, what, we could change this and this will save some money and we can do this. And instead of everyone saying, how do I get out of here and find a job? Like everyone pulled together. She was so right. Like her leadership style it made everyone come together as a team. And it was kind of eye-opening for me because often you think, oh, I have bad news, I should try to make it better. But sometimes if you share it, like your team is going to join you in trying to make things better. And then you have a much better likelihood of success.
Yeah, it's a little bit like we were saying earlier about how what people value is the authenticity rather than the pretense. And I'm the same as you. Earlier in my career, I was really, a lot of the time, tempted to put on what I thought should look right. But over the years, I found that actually, even if it didn't look as good as it was expected, people still trusted it more because they knew that it was the reality rather than some sort of tweak on it. Now, on the Values Jam cards, Brad, we've got an option to ask your own question. So let me invite you to ask your own question about teamwork, starting with who, what, where, when, why, or how.
So I'd love to hear your favorite. I'd love hearing stories. So I'd love to hear your favorite example of teamwork that you've seen. I know you consult with a lot of companies. You've seen so much. Like, what's your favorite example, and what can we learn from that? If you could pick out one.
Yeah, so I am a soccer fan, and I've supported Manchester United since I was like 8 years old. Um, and so my answer's really not going to be the sort of answer that you were expecting, I think, when you asked that question, because in 1999, Manchester United played Bayern Munich in the final of the Champions League, which is the tournament for Europe. And they were losing 1-0, and it was the 89th minute. And I was watching in my lounge with my eldest son, and it was like, just get ready for this because it looks like we've lost. But I remember thinking, it's not done till it's done, and I wonder if, and there's a small chance that kind of thing was going through my head rather than, oh, let it just be over and we're done. And so then they scored a goal. And my son said to me, do you think that they will be able to win in extra time? And I just said to him, they might not need extra time, which is a stupid thing to say. And then they scored another goal. And so they won the game in real time, in the normal time. And so the backup point here is that through the history of that club, since I've supported them over those years, they have developed a reputation of being able to score those late goals at important times. And I think that for me is a sign of real teamwork, where you never give up and you always believe in your team, yourself and others, that you're going to be able to do what everybody else might say is impossible. So it's that really deep-seated conviction, but actually backed up by being able to do it for real. What
Right.
about you?
So I need to, because we're talking about soccer or football,
Yeah.
I have to ask, have you seen Ted Lasso?
No.
So it is an amazing television show,
Okay.
and it's about a football team in the UK. And there are so many lessons about teamwork and leadership. It's on Apple TV, and I would highly recommend it. It
So is it
is,
LASSO?
yes.
Okay. Okay. I'll look it up. Thank you. And so what's your story about teamwork in answer to your own question?
I'm trying to know. I'd have to answer the question as well. Uh, so to your earlier point of how sometimes things that aren't quite related pop into your head, and I will eventually answer your question, but like what I think about teamwork and sport teams is like having coached so many youth sport teams. The teams with the best players don't always win.
Yeah.
And like often the best players are expecting that they're going to score the goals or hit the home runs or whatever the case is. Not in all cases, but often you see this with professional teams, like these teams that are stacked with all the best players, right? These pro baseball teams in the US, they don't win. And it's the teams where you can just tell by watching that they like each other, that they're a team, that they want the team to win more than their batting average, that have a better shot. And I think that's what we all strive for our teams. We want them to want the team to win. And that's what we want to be a part of. It's so much more fun when you're part of this group and together you're trying to get somewhere and make it happen. So just as I'm thinking about sports, I think like it was always interesting where you'd think these teams that are so stacked with the stars should technically win, but they don't.
Yeah, that is something magical about teamwork, isn't it? And there's a guy that fascinates me called David Bohm, Bohm, and earlier in his life he was an astrophysicist. But later in his life, he became interested in philosophy and dialogue. It's a really weird kind of combination, an unusual combination. And what he talked about a lot was how scientists try to break everything down into the smallest particles. That's how they see the world. But what he said was that's missing the point, actually, because particles don't exist in isolation. They're part of the universe in the biggest sense. And you need to realize that particles are dependent on being part of that bigger picture rather than just existing on their own. And what you just described there reminded me of that, because perhaps that's the magic of teamwork that we kind of don't understand or isn't easy to explain, where it is easy to explain how talented and gifted and brilliant an individual is, but how do you explain how that person knew to go there and was expecting the ball to be sent there and was there on time and then did this? They couldn't have done that without the others. And David Bohm, the way that he describes this relationship between the bits and the whole is, he said, at night, if you're lucky enough to be able to look up at the stars, that's what people do. They admire the stars. But actually, he says they're missing the point, because it's that black velvet sky behind the stars that is, just as responsible for the beauty that you're admiring. And I just love that example. So thank you. You've made me make a connection between sport and teamwork and his work, which I don't know where that's going to go, but that's intrigued me. So thank you.
You're welcome. I love the stars example. I would have never thought of that, but hearing it, it's one of those things you hear it and it's like, it makes perfect sense.
Yeah, yeah. All right. So we need to draw this to a close, surely. I can't believe that we've been, the time has just gone like that. So what are you encouraged to do differently about teamwork as a result of our conversation?
I think, one thing I'm going to do is relook at all the groups I'm involved with and think about, are we doing enough to stay connected? And uh, make sure that we are. Because sometimes, as someone who's been with, a lot of the organizations I work with, I've been there so long that you kind of just take things for the way they are, and just to step back and say, all right, we do have new employees who've been joining, new people, new team members. Like, what are we doing to keep everyone a part of the team, and how do we focus on that? So I'm going to think about that for sure. I think I'm going to check out some of Boehm's writings because it sounds.
I'll send you a video clip and a link to a book. Okay. Now, I think you're being quite tough on yourself, because what you said was, I'm going to have a look at all the groups that I'm involved with, and all of that sort of stuff. So is there one group that you're tempted to start with?
Well, I mean, I should say we're starting a new advisory council at Hopeworks.
Okay.
So that's the right group to start with. Like, it's a group within of, outside people who are helping us, and just making sure from the start we're doing all the right things to be a team.
Okay. You've given me mine, which is dead easy. So look up Ted Lasso.
All
That's
right.
what I'm going to do. So, Brad, thank you very much for your time today for our Values Jam on the topic of teamwork. It, like we said at the beginning, we didn't know where it was going to go. And I can feel my brain is whirring from our conversation. So thank you for that. It's been a joy.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me. This was fun.
Okay, cheers.
Cheers.